There's a trend in society at the moment, and in certain influential realms of pop science. We're being told to look up from our screens, to disconnect from our phones. We're being told that communication is best conducted face-to-face, and that after several thousands of years in the evolution of language, humanity has finally come close to perfecting language and communication. This near perfection, it seems, was reached just around a decade ago, just before the internet became as big a thing as it is today. And for many people, smartphones and social media are responsible for the current downward trend we're seeing in language and evolution. For many people, they're the straw that broke the camel's back. But language and evolution has never just been an either-or case. We don't have to understand it as something that's completely alien to us and that's something that's broken. There's always been moral and social panics in terms of language and communication. The printing press was seen as ruining communication. Before the smartphone, the landline phone was seen as ruining communication. Pluto decried writing as ruining communication, video games, Dungeons and Dragons, comic books, and yet language survives and thrives and evolves. Indeed, youth today are incredibly skilled with language and playful with language. With memes and GIFs and emojis, they've created, in essence, a sort of modern Cockney rhyming slang, a code that's shaped and shared for their own social needs, their own social environments, and importantly, the specific social sites in which they're acting and interacting. They've created a way of saying, I see you, I understand you, I get that reference, I like the things that you like. They're playing with language, they're testing it, they're pulling at it, they're seeing what it can do and what it can't do. They're testing everything that they can do with language. And that's a great thing. And of course, there are positives and negatives to every medium of communication. There are things that we can do face-to-face that we can't via a phone, a landline phone, a text, a tweet, a letter, semaphore, smoke signals, and vice versa. This is best summed up by Marshall McLuhan, who famously said, "The medium is the message," a phrase that captures an entire school of study that focuses upon how different mediums of communication emphasize certain communicative traits and minimize others. But it's important to remember with youth and online language that it's not a case of either or. Youth don't forget offline communicative norms and values when they learn online communicative norms and values. Youth don't forget how to communicate effectively in offline spaces when they learn how to communicate effectively in online spaces. We all exist in multiple realms at any given time. My research and the research of many other people has shown that youth, and indeed all of us, both online and offline, have the ability to understand how to interact effectively within any given space, how to understand the rules of that environment, how to talk and interact and communicate within any given environment. Whether we adhere to those values is quite a different thing, but we understand them nonetheless. And that's what I wanted to look at in my research. I wanted to understand how we're presenting identity and how we're performing and how online the sites that we're on affect our actions and interactions. And part of this is nothing new. In 1959, Irving Goffman suggested, in essence, that all the world's a stage. With identity performance, he was looking at the idea of how we present ourselves, how we act and interact. And he suggested we act and interact differently based on the audiences we're talking to. He suggested that with different audiences, we would present ourselves differently. If we extend the metaphor of the stage away from just the effects of the audience upon our actions and interactions, we can start to consider the effect of the physical layout of the staging, how that affects how we act and interact, how we present our identity. We can start to consider the effects of the props we have available to use to act through and with and on. In the case of a TEDx talk, there aren't many props up here for me to use. And these things will affect how we present our identity. And potentially, nowhere are we more aware of the effects of the staging and the effects of the props we have available to us than in social media, where there's such a wide variety of props and such a wide variety of sites, such a wide variety of mediums that are asking different things of us, that are asking us to act and interact in a variety of ways. Unfortunately, in social media research, and in the media writ large, there's a tendency to use Facebook and Twitter alone to generalize what social media is. There's a tendency to use just these two sites to discuss the entirety of social media. But social media is so much more than just these two stages. and just the limited props that these sites offer. How Facebook and Twitter define what it is to be social is very different to, say, how Vine does, or how LinkedIn does, or how YouTube does. We need to understand more than just these sites alone. And that's what I wanted to do in my research. I wanted to understand what it meant for our identity to present 140 characters, but also what it meant to send a 6-second video on Vine, or an image that deletes itself after 24 hours. To briefly sum up my research, I found that young people could adeptly navigate online spaces, that they could present identity effectively in a number of different sites, and that they could use the props to present themselves effectively. They preferred sites that were more restrictive, sites like Google Plus and LO that let them decide how they present themselves. They didn't get on with as well. They didn't understand those sites as well, and they couldn't present their identities as well on those sites as they could on Instagram or Snapchat, where there's more limited modes of communication. And the overall identity they present was a mix of their offline baggage and these sites and the specific staging and props they had available to themselves. So we had specific iterations of identity online. And all of this research, a lot of the research that's being done online, isn't just helping us understand online issues, isn't just helping us understand the online world. A lot of the research that's being done online is helping us to address decades-old issues in sociology. A lot of the theories and methodologies being produced online are helping us to look through a new lens at older, more established problems in sociology. And we're starting to understand that the online and the offline aren't separate realms, that there's no longer a strict divide with online and offline, that this wall between them is increasingly porous, is increasingly irrelevant, and is increasingly shifting. We're not in an either-or state. We're somewhere in between the two at any given time. And the divide between the two is shifting. I've witnessed young people, for example, talk about a YouTube video, show each other that YouTube video, recreate it, film the recreation, put it back up online, share it around, and then talk about the likes and comments that was getting. We're moving between this realm. And as mentioned at the top of this talk, the reaction to this by some people is to try and prop up this wall, to try and reinforce and plug the holes and say, no, offline ideals are much better than online ideals. Our established ways of talking are much better than your newer ways of talking. Our understanding is much better than your newer understandings. As educators, we can't do that. We can't spend our energy and time propping up this wall and plugging the holes. We can pull it down. We can let it fade. We can say, how can we use social media to address decade-old problems in education? How can we understand older issues? We can show them Shakespeare via tweets. We can show them Ginsberg and Camus via Vine. We can show them artists that are hard to conceptualize via Instagram and Snapchat. We can show them issues that are incredibly hard to talk about, like sex ed and drugs, via their peers on YouTube rather than via their teachers. We can encourage this. The more that we build a wall between the online and the offline, the more that we keep education in an established offline place, is the more that we ignore the skills that they have, the increasingly relevant skills that they have in their lives, that they're growing online, the ability to talk about self succinctly, the ability to express identity, the ability to show yourself reflectively. I have problems cutting this talk down to around 9 minutes, but they can express themselves in 140 characters, in a 6-second video, in a single image with a filter. And this is great. This is fantastic, and we shouldn't be putting our energy into desperately trying to stop the flood of the online into the educational system. We should be encouraging these skills. We should be encouraging the use of social media. There's no point using terms like digital natives and hiding behind digital immigrants and saying, no, we don't understand social media. That's untrue. They didn't understand social media when they first came to it. We all learn. We learn together, and we can use social media via our rules. We can use social media via our understanding and help them to grow their skills in social media. Thank you very much.